It's a counter landscape to South Bend, way out at the edge of Cape Cod. The other thing about that poem, which you maybe noticed, is that it's one sentence long. And so that was sort of the challenge I set myself, is write a poem that's one sentence, only one sentence. Probably would have been corrected as a run-on sentence by Sister Mary Arthur when I was in 8th grade. Does anybody know the poet R.S. Thomas? He's a wonderful poet. Welsh poet. And he lived way out in this peninsula called Aberdaron. And he was a priest in the Episcopal Church, and just ministered to the people out on that peninsula for many years. And one of the other topics that came up at dinner was, how do you find time just to be contemplative in a world that's always at you in one way or another, from just general media or tweets, as we discussed. So R.S. Thomas, a little bit older than us here, got away. He died, I believe, in 2001. So not that old. It's called A Stone in Aberdaron, and it has an epigraph from one of R.S. Thomas's poems. The poem in the rock and the poem in the mind are not one. Driving the clyn, our tongues back to teeth, speaking the palate L like Bushmen, soft click of a key sticking in language. We navigate coastal roads in rain where the Atlantic shambles to hell's mouth and whistling sands, like wind-stanched pilgrims sped out of the past by some fleet machine to the Shearwater Church on the Sound. Your sound, your church, an eyrie at the crux of the human village in the sea, ancient fields weathered into bracken, brine, the membrane of the shingle shore, runnels of foam in the slow tidal hush. Obstinate priest, rock-faced, you listen for the presence of your God like a pulse thrumming in the offing's ashen verge, a whisper in the fleece of gunshot clouds. Even now, chin-deep in world, I love your raw vigil at the mirror's plunge, your rapt loneliness before the fathoms. Here, under Hiwen's double nave, for year you raised in faith the gleaming zero of the chalice rim. In the chancel's womb, you felt Christ like gritstone in the host. For you, the mind honed itself on this edge, your slate sublime hardened as a gem underground, resistant to thought, to song. The threadbare scripts of keen equations are vagrant shrines of the passing species, and history pitiable as grass dunged by lost droves, while grace ran, a river disappearing down a swallow hole, to surface your maker's rage, your longing, in the depths, intimate immensity that left you grim and brooding on the hills, your prayers' signals beamed through shattered glass. God was a raptor hunting you at night, the brute vacuum portioned between stars, nameless well of sourceless light, sky's window, and bone's rapture at the curtain's breath. Your ashes scattered among these swells have mingled in the seething grottos below bare cliffs, the seawall slicked green as in some pre-Silurian dawn. And there, in the scoured shallows, this stone, big as a room, washed as if by microns ashore, bright flecked, emerald, amazing, we feel around it for the miracle it is, ruin of earth, capsule of pure time, lobe of the Godhead's adamantine brain. What would you have conjured from the gift as day's first bathers dive into the surf? I said there was going to be a couple of elegiac poems. I suppose that's sort of an elegiac poem. I want to read a poem about one of my old colleagues when I taught at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin for a number of years, Mark Southern. He was a wonderful teacher and a great linguist. He knew something like 26 different languages, going back to ancient Sanskrit. Just a brilliant mind, and he died at just a very young age of 45. So this is a poem that's addressed to Mark. And it does a lot of play. It does a lot of word play because Mark was a linguist. So you'll hear a little word play through here. I think that's it. It's called A Greek Cup at the Met, Metropolitan Museum in New York. This crowd in smoky blackness below the rim riotous along the Tondo's reeling frieze that looks spotlit, as if with slip and brush the painter fashioned revels from utter night. Could be the yardarm's Dionysian crush we'd join in Fridays after class, a jorum or two, as the Irish say, and in Hittite, Latin, Frisian, Hebrew, Norse, Portuguese, Sanskrit, Saxon, Greek. You could order a pint in any lingo, as though you'd cracked the genome that decoded Bodhi from Babel, the Besh Demir and Glotz-scored Ogam. We all speak Greek, you'd say, and showed us, tracing from English, Yiddish, gibberish, through word hordes in half-light, threading back as from the plumb line of a name to the source. Your labyrinth of Ithacas, where in each the words we are make their home. To be on parole with you, lazy, once again in your parole. I'd make that wish like some errant gob rubbing a phoneme bright as a lamp. Calyx, its breath the aspirid shape of this crater, its flower, its cave, the form a root rooted, ineradicable, hiding and bound, the gist in the morphologist's dream. In its wake, I'd follow the vessel's curve past parted parties and the fate's unfolding glaze to pull you from the whirlpool where the tide runs darkest at the narrows and the sea churns. Pull you from the calyx, car, the gaping mouth, from the ribdus, swallower, your death, its design and Dasein. How you'd love to find in the craw of the beast a German cognate for to be. Would what gulped you down spew you on high, and if not here, then on some other lee, where you could be the bard, us your lost crew, where you've mastered the Esperanto of the gods. On this meander mark, I see you in the breed incised on oven clay to the cup's empty brim, and you're the soul the dolphin's back abides, riding wine-dark tongues of waves into the hush. Mark was quite a translator too, and I'm going to read 4 short translations from the German. It's called Quartet. The first poem is a translation from Rainer Maria Rilke. The second one is from Georg Trakl. The third one is from Friedrich Hölderlin. And the last one's from the German-Israeli poet Nelly Sachs. Evening. Leisurely the evening puts on the robe held up for it by a crown of ancient trees. You watch, and the realms move apart like lovers. One travels heavenwards, and the other one falls and lets you be, bound to neither universe, nor quite so dark as the house with its silence, nor wholly so certain as eternity implored, like whatever it is that becomes a star and rises, and lets you be, to unravel beyond language your life with its fear and infinity burgeoning, so that, now walled in, now encompassing all, it pulsates in you. Stone, star, wave, particle. All souls. Gentlemen, ladies, a scrum of grieving friends, sow their flowers now, the blue and the red, on graves where the dusk sun lowers its curtain. Poor helpless puppets they rehearse before death. How rife with fear they look, how beaten to dust standing there, shadows behind darkened shrubs. Cries of the unborn keen in the autumn gusts, and someone watches lights and crazy reelings flitter. The moans of lovers are breathing in the branches, and with them rot bodies of a mother and child. How unreal the roundabout of the living's dance, and how strangely mingled with the evening wind. Their lives are so plagued, broken-hearted, lacerated. Have mercy, God, on women's torments and despair, and on these requiems, so hopeless and desolate. Hushed, the lonely wander through vaulting halls of stars. The way. Greatness. You wanted it too. But love hurls everything down. Grief grovels us till we're tame. Though not for nothing are all of us bowed back to the fetal cringe from which we came. Go any which way. Somewhere in sacred night, dumb nature schemes our hatching brood of days. Just so, bent from hell's own cowering heights, is there nothing straight, nothing not astray. I've suffered enough to know this. To my knowledge, never have the heavenly, the upholders of all, never have they guided me like mortal masters with care and caution along a level path. Human, essay everything, so bespeak the heavens, so that fed on the living core, you will learn to give thanks to all that is, and grasp the freedom to go where you will, having torn yourself asunder. The Seeker. Like beings that exist in distant nebulae, we pass, revenants from dream to dream. We descend right through the blinding walls of light bending through its sevenfold prison, but invisible as glass at last, and wordless, the quantum singularity of death held up in eternity's crystal chalice, and night's wing beats laid bare with every mystery. I'm going to read 2 or 3 more, and I think I will read an Orpheus poem. Does anybody join Second Life, that sort of virtual reality? Somebody. You are on Second. I'm sorry. You're on Second. You're on Second. Did you buy like a little clock there? A day or two to see what it was. Okay. I haven't joined it either, but I imagine what happens if Orpheus joined it, the great traditional historical, not historical, mythological poet. So this is called Orpheus in Second Life. And what it does is it imagines if, Orpheus is torn apart, at the end of his life by the Maenads. So, what happens if he gets uploaded at that particular point is what this poem is essentially doing. And so it tries to imagine that. Some of the diction in the poem is from some of the lingo of Second Life, which you obviously know backwards and forwards now. There you go. So you'll hear some lingo which is not too strange. You'll be able to pick it up, but it builds the fabric of if Orpheus, what if Orpheus went into Second Life, desperate for some fun after being torn apart. Orpheus in Second Life. Their blood like mounting drums with every word you sang, so the spurned women gathered in their throats the shrieks that drowned your voice, that made stones and trees swoon, then struck, then limb from limb lionized you in the true primal way until your head, torn from the scattered mash, floated downstream with the singing lips, the singing lyre. Better now that your body's been hacked to bits to find yourself uploaded to assembling bytes, to be fashioned in the image of an avatar, cyber alter ego from primitives, textures infinitely pliant as the flesh, childbirth from olive bark, those blood drops spawning anemones, your songs within songs. Here, on the wide virtual continent, in the teeming city of embodied shades, you can live the life you might have lived without the God's ever-pending breath urging itself inside you. Go out among the matrix of creations, morphing throngs, faces primed like yours for a new life, your skin alive in the digital breeze. You are anything now you wish yourself to be. Coder, gamer, sculptor, convener of analogs at embassies salient in the metaverse, its flawless terms, its portals bright and bloodless. And when griefers come like fickle gods, their havoc cannot harm, but only bring the briefest lag to the lure of one's desire. How many Eurydices await you here, incomparably iterative in their scripts, so each time together is first and last, riskless in the mist and mass of her going. Yes, Orpheus, better to forget the call of your own voice, the sorrows of the rocks and beasts, the ashen procession of leaves, all that mourns you, and the one in shadow whose longing outsings your own, tempting you back to the mold and makeshift body of the world. I'll just read two more. This first poem is called Late Bloomer. And I think you might recognize the form of it. But I'll have to answer questions after the reading, so I'll just read it straight. Late Bloomer. Something whispered I wanted more of myself. That's how I turned into the fluor of myself. The lake, the ripples shimmer, that lilting face, I'll guzzle the infinite pour of myself. What is this flow I feel, its course through soft bone, the current, the mother lode, the ore of myself? Fill me with all things, empty me completely, I winnow and still am the store of myself. Imagine Earth, the stars, all space expanding, and finding everywhere the core of myself. If soul's estate means a mansion's many rooms, then someday I will take a tour of myself. Do you think me insane, my hypocrite twin, a catatonic stare, the whore of myself? Call me this, call me that, call me what you will. I surpass beyond words the lore of myself. Time blooms with space, and there sums all I am. I am forever the before of myself. Beauty is truth, truth beauty, beauty is truth. X to nth power is the shore of myself. Narcissus, the name of wind passing through wind. Now watch me step through the door of myself. And I'll finish with a poem called The Turnpike. I have a turnpike here, but this is actually the Massachusetts Turnpike. And I think this is pretty straightforward. There is a little epigraph from John Donne. And it is, an expansion like gold to airy thinness beat, the turnpike. You away, and me on the Peter Pan, heading home from my own required remove. I'm drawn by the window's broad reflection, the traffic passing along it like a nerve. An endless charge of cars inside the pane, the voltage of the reel. Though as they go sliding down its long ethereal sheen, where the solid world softens into flow, they take on the ghostly substance of a dream, or rather what we picture dreams to be, since when we're in them, they are what we seem, and cause us joy or pain as vividly as the lives we think we live between the lines that imprint us and we pass between. Here, the world inverts. Shades materialize and cars speeding left expand a breach that transports into doubles on the right, and those in transit opposite condense their mirror selves in a second teeming flight, as if our lightship bus could break such bonds and matter shatter. Like all things physical, it's a conjure of parts and energies, a neverland of haunts inside the skull. though saying so won't prevent this child's cries from jolting with their needful disturbance, or the aging woman across the aisle from leaning in her slackened, palpable face, comically, mildly, till the infant calms. If, as scientists say, we are like hurled stones, as bounded and bound dear by material, and that our minds resolve into a mist we thinly feel to be the actual, then who's to say the rock is not the air it hurtles through, observed from deeper in, not above? So you and I circuit there, firing the inexhaustible engine. Thank you.
Daniel is going to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you for being so gracious.
About translating from the German and what it's like to spend time in the German stanza forms and line lengths.
Well, you know, I have to say...
Daniel, would you repeat the question?
What's that?
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, what's it like to spend some time with the German stanza forms and translating from the German? You know, it was a kind of a discovery to me that I actually wanted to incline myself to do this, but I've done some translation from Rilke now, and I've done a recent word translation from Hölderlin now. And I'm just drawn in by the sort of metaphysical daring of those poets, and trying to get that vision right in an English stanza. The stanza forms are integrated into the translation, and the really hard part is to try and make it sound like it's English. I mean, my view of translation is that it needs to be a poem in English. There's only so much you can do with poems that are translated and sound like bad poems in English because they're translations. So I feel that it's okay for a poet to pursue the after Hölderlin, after Rilke kind of thing, and try and to make it work as an English language poem. And I think that's where the translation happened, because translation comes from the Latin to carry over. So you can't just, you know, repeat whatever language you're translating from in the English. It has to be a real transformation, a real transfiguration that has some truth and connection to the original, but also has a life, I think, as an English poem. I'm not a huge translator. I've translated bits and pieces, things here and there. I don't expect I will ever be a huge translator. I've translated some of Paul Celan's poems too now, but I know people who are big translators, like David Ferry's a magnificent translator, and I think he agrees that it has to be alive in the English language if you're going to translate from another. So that's what I try to do. Thanks. Great question. Other questions?